He pulled out a bottle, like a small water bottle. The bottle was filled with brown fluid. And my mind started to race, and I was just trying to put the pieces together at that point. And I knew that I wasn't safe, and I knew that it wasn't water.
Military life is all Katie Blanchard knows. She grew up in a military family, served as a nurse at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, and her husband, Troy, a father of 3, also serves in the military. The service gave her a life, but it also nearly killed her 3 years ago in an attack she may not be able to seek justice for.
I was put in charge of a civilian employee in 2015, and so I was working on some issues that he had, meeting performance standards, meeting behavioral standards. At first it was just when we were together without people around, and he would yell at me. He would tell me that, it was his office or his files. He would swear at me and tell me to go away.
She warned her colleagues for months he was a danger, until the day she was proven right.
It was after hours, and I had noticed that my attacker was still in his office. And he had done this before, where he would stay late out of duty hours. And so at that point, I grabbed a doctor, and I had asked him to escort me just in case anything would happen. Because at that point, I wasn't thinking, is he going to attack me? It's when is he going to attack me? And went back to my office. And at that point, I took off my Vocera, which is our intercommunication device through the hospital. And that device in the past is what I had used to call if I needed help. So I put that down, turned it off, closed up everything on my computer. And just as I was texting my husband that, I was leaving work, I had turned because I had seen him in the corner of my eye. But instead of continuing to walk past, he had stopped in my doorway. He pulled out a bottle, like a small water bottle. The bottle was filled with brown fluid. And my mind started to race, and I was just trying to put the pieces together at that point. And I knew that I wasn't safe, and I knew that it wasn't water. And he started to splash the fluid on me, and right away I could smell the gasoline. I couldn't even fathom what was going on. I couldn't put the pieces together, but I knew that he was going to try to kill me. And just as fast as he had splashed all the gasoline on my face as I was sitting there, he lit 2 matches. And I didn't see him throw the matches, I just felt the flame. And I couldn't see, but I felt everything. And right away I started to think of just surviving.
Katie's entire body was burnt. The fire had spread to her face, her hair, her hands, and her throat.
I didn't know how hurt I was, but I did know that I might not make it through it. I felt sad that I was going to miss the time with my family, that I wasn't going to be there for my boys growing up.
Katie's attacker, Clifford Curry, was convicted of attempted murder in 2018 and sentenced to up to 20 years in federal prison.
I'm happy that he's going to be put away for the max. It doesn't seem like the max is ever enough, especially something that has not only affected me, but my family.
But Katie doesn't believe justice has been served. She says the attack happened only after her pleas for help were routinely ignored. How many times do you think that you told your supervisors about your to-be attacker?
I think every day for almost a year. I sent emails, I met face-to-face with my superiors, and I begged for help. And I begged to be protected against somebody I knew was a ticking time bomb, somebody who I knew was going to kill me or try.
So Katie is trying to sue the U.S. Army, her employer, for negligence.
I don't know why they decided that my life wasn't important or that they weren't going to protect me, but how I see it is that because of their negligence, I'm going to struggle for the rest of my life. This is a life sentence for me.
But unlike everyday Americans, as a service member, that litigation likely won't go anywhere. Under a 1950 Supreme Court ruling called the Feres Doctrine, service members are barred from suing the government for injuries sustained while on active duty. Let's back up. At its founding, the U.S. adopted the English common law principle that citizens can only sue the government, for which the government consents to be sued. So for over 100 years, people had few options but to ask Congress to address their issues. In 1946, Congress finally passed the FTCA, the Federal Tort Claims Act, which said the federal government can be held liable, but for a few exemptions. One of those exemptions is 2680J, which shields the United States from any tort claim, quote, arising out of the combatant activities of the military or naval forces or the Coast Guard during time of war. In 1950, the Supreme Court in the case Feres versus United States interpreted the exemption beyond the FTCA's plain language. The court decided the act barred any service member from suing at any time while they're on active duty. In other words, quote, the government is not liable under the FTCA for injuries to servicemen where the injuries arise out of or are in the course of activity incident to service. Feres has blocked justice for cases like Navy Lieutenant Rebecca Daniel, who died in routine childbirth, or a Marine recruit who died from hazing, or a Marine sergeant who died after his doctors didn't tell him he had melanoma. In September 2019, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana and Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii introduced bipartisan legislation that would allow service members to sue the government for medical malpractice. Rep. Jackie Speier introduced similar legislation in the House.
There's never been a bill, there's never been a hearing, a vote in Congress, but that is the Feres Doctrine, and that has been what has been the law of the land for 70 years. Service members' spouses and families, civilian federal employees, and even convicted prisoners have the right to sue for negligence, but not our service members.
But there's pushback. In the past, the court argued that altering Feres would erode military discipline, burden the U.S. with private bills on behalf of service members, and lower morale. This rationale has been repeated by military hawks in Congress.
And what the court was worried about, and what defenders of the Feres Doctrine have been worried about over the past 70 years, is the problem that happens when service members start going to court rather than dealing with the chain of command that they have. And so, not unlike workmen's compensation, which people sometimes deal with in the workplace themselves, the idea is that we keep people out of court, but we give them what are hopefully generous or compensatory benefits on the other side of it. But if a commander is worried about his subordinates suing him if he behaves negligently, and not just worried about all the other consequences the military can uniquely vest upon him as a commander, that's going to change, that's going to make him think about how he's going to accomplish his mission, how he's going to organize and train his troops with factors that are totally personal, that are not just how do we best accomplish the mission.
But in 2019, the Senate overwhelmingly passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which included the carve-out for medical malpractice. And while that's a monumental step forward, it still doesn't cover people like Katie, who is specifically suing for negligence. In a statement, the Department of Defense said it, quote, does not support erosion of the long-standing Feres Doctrine. It added that, quote, the Feres Doctrine prevents the inequity of allowing some military members to sue, while others, such as those injured in combat or in stateside training, cannot. Instead, Congress has provided that all service members are covered by a comprehensive, no-fault compensation system. The Department of Justice did not respond to a request for comment.
You know, they kept saying to me, well, the VA will take care of you. Don't worry, financially, you're going to retire. It's not even a quarter of my paycheck. How am I going to take care of my family, take care of 3 growing boys, put them get them off to college. How am I going to put food on the table? I had a whole lifetime ahead of me, and that was taken from me. And now I have to struggle. I have to, beg them for lotion. And I don't think that that's taking care of somebody.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.